On this Monday night, egregious and embarrassing error.
I apologize profusely.
The fury after the House of Commons honored a man who fought for the Nazis. How could this happen? Demanding justice for a murdered Canadian Sikh leader.
Who's the real terrorist?
The action protesters are pushing Ottawa to take. The finale of the Hollywood writers' strike.
The mood as soon as the tentative deal was announced was one of ecstasy.
Why production won't resume right away. And no longer stacking up. Why Lego's plan to get greener has fallen to pieces.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. There are calls for the Speaker of the House of Commons to resign after honoring a man who fought for a Nazi unit during the Second World War. Anthony Rota says he takes full responsibility and has apologized, but the incident, which took place during Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Canada on Friday, has become an international embarrassment.
My sincere apologies to the House, to each and every one of you who are in the House today, and to all Canadians for having been put through this.
This is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians.
We are clear and unequivocal. We believe that the Speaker needs to step down.
Jewish advocacy groups have expressed outrage over the invitation, and MPs from all parties have condemned Rota's decision, saying they trusted his judgment when they stood up and applauded. So how did this happen, and why did no one seemingly flag this person's past before he was publicly honored? David Akin has our top story tonight.
I wish to make a brief statement.
A somber, sad speaker.
It was my decision, and I apologize profusely. I cannot tell you how regretful it is.
Speaker Anthony Rota had invited one of his Ukrainian constituents from North Bay, Ontario, Yaroslav Hunka, to watch Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's speech on Friday. Then Rota singled him out as a Second World War hero, and all present stood to applaud. Many would discover to their horror later that they had applauded a man who wore the uniform of a Nazi soldier during the Second World War.
As a descendant of Holocaust survivors whose majority of her family walked in to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and only my grandfather and his brother walked out, I feel particularly hurt.
Hunka was 16 in 1941, and like many young Ukrainian men of the time, he joined German army units who were attacking Stalin's Russia. Many of those Ukrainians were motivated first by the Holodomor, Stalin's deliberate starvation of millions of Ukrainians in the 1930s. But many also believed joining the Germans would help Ukraine independence. Here in Canada, there are monuments in Oakville, Ontario, and in Edmonton recognizing the military unit in which Hunka served. But Hunka's unit, the 14 SS Galicia Division, was also involved in war crimes, in the mass murder of Poles, of Ukrainians, and of Jews. The NDP says Rota's role in inviting Hunka last week disqualifies him from being Speaker.
Sadly, I don't believe you can continue in this role. Regrettably, I must respectfully ask that you step aside.
The Conservatives reserved judgment on Rota's fitness. Instead, they focused their criticism on the Trudeau government.
There was a Nazi in the chamber. There's only one entity, one group that could have done anything about it.
Today is Yom Kippur. The Jewish community, my community, is horrified. Only one office in the country is responsible for vetting visitors to this place, the Prime Minister's office.
The incident is now attracting international attention. Russia is using it as recruitment propaganda, and at least one ally, Poland, is demanding an official apology. Neetu.
For all of this, David, there's still that basic question. How did this happen? How is it that no authority knew about Hunka's past before he was singled out for applause?
Speaker Rota today said that he himself blew it, that neither he nor his staff did the appropriate background check. Now, the Conservatives say, as you heard, that's hard to believe because they had to provide a list of all the guests that they invited to Zelensky's speech, presumably so that they could be vetting. But here's the thing.
Canada's security agencies would have checked those names for real security threats. Somebody might want to harm the Ukrainian president. Our police, though, they do not have the responsibility to identify people like Hunka simply because they might be a political liability to a sitting government. That's something different. Neither.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Security was high at several Indian consulates and the embassy in Ottawa today. Sikh Canadians held protests 1 week after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made an explosive allegation linking Indian agents to the assassination of Canadian Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Since then, both countries have kicked out diplomats. And as Touria Izri reports, protesters want Canada to put more pressure on India.
Protesters burned the Indian flag in Toronto and spit on an effigy of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, accusing him of having blood on his hands in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
India, who has masterminded the killing of Canadian citizen on the Canadian soil.
Canada kicked out a diplomat, and India did the same. The retaliatory expulsions come after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau revealed Indian agents may be linked to the killing.
We would like for the Canadian government to expel all the Indian diplomats.
This was one of several demonstrations organized by the US-based group Sikhs for Justice. The organization advocates for a separate Sikh state carved out of northern India, known as Khalistan. Protesters also gathered outside the Indian consulate in Vancouver and in front of the High Commission in Ottawa.
Government of Canada and all the Western countries have lots of power, lots of clout to force India to come to the table.
The protesters are demanding the Indian government cooperate with Canada in the investigation into Hardeep Singh Nijjar's murder. But for now, that appears unlikely. India has called the allegations absurd and accused Canada of sheltering terrorists. In New Delhi, protesters marched against Trudeau and accused Sikh separatists of singling out Hindus in Canada.
Leave Canada, go to India.
This video of a member of Sikhs for Justice is circulating on social media. South Asia experts say that kind of rhetoric may play into Modi's hands.
The Indian government has tried to refocus attention away from the allegation against it and more toward this view of the Indian government that Canada has had these anti-India forces on its soil for a very long time.
Global Affairs has changed its travel advisory to India, urging Canadians to exercise caution because of anti-Canada protests and sentiment. A mirror of the advisory put out by India's government last week, and another sign of how tense the situation has become. Touria Izri, Global News, Ottawa.
RCMP and BC are investigating reports of racist signs being posted in at least 2 cities. Signs were put up in Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam advertising a whites-only moms and tots group. It says, "Escape forced diversity and join other proud parents of European children." In a statement, the city of Port Coquitlam condemns the sign, saying this vile garbage isn't welcome in our community or anywhere else. In Quebec today, the RCMP demolished its last building on Roxham Road. The quiet dead-end street south of Montreal became an unofficial border crossing for asylum seekers in 2017. With the renegotiation of the Safe Third Country Agreement earlier this year, the number of migrants crossing at Roxham has dropped. But as Mike Armstrong explains, the issue hasn't disappeared as much as it's shifted.
With the demolition of this building, the RCMP says it hopes to return Roxham Road to residents.
We understand that our police operation has disrupted your quality of life.
The force is apologizing to locals for the disruption of the last 6 years, a period that saw 113,000 migrants move through. Well, times have changed.
The number of migrants that crosses through Roxham has dwindled, and our presence here is no longer necessary.
The RCMP now says its resources are better allocated on patrols along the border rather than at what had basically been a funnel. Roxham was an unofficial border crossing. Under the Safe Third Country Agreement with the U.S., migrants couldn't ask for asylum at regular border crossings. They'd be turned back. but there was a loophole. If they crossed between border crossings and reached Canada, they'd be stopped by police, but allowed to seek asylum. Well, in March, during a visit by President Biden, the U.S. and Canada announced they were closing that loophole. And foot traffic at Roxham since has dried up. Migrants are still coming, just not through here.
This just pushes the problem. The same way he's pushing that building down, they're just pushing that problem to other places.
According to immigration officials, there were more asylum seekers in the first 8 months of this year than in the same period last year. It jumped more than 50%. But at the beginning of 2023, asylum seekers arriving by land outnumbered those arriving by air by about 5 to 1. Since the loophole closed, that's flipped. The bulk now arrive by air by close to 4 to 1. Now, there is a growing problem police are watching at airports like here in Montreal. Migrants arriving in Canada as tourists with no intention of taking in any of the sights.
What we're seeing is that people are arriving at international airports, spending a few hours in Canada, and then automatically crossing illegally into the United States. So we are monitoring that situation very closely.
What it's all meant, the RCMP admits, is a more complicated situation. Millions of dollars were spent on Roxham Road, keeping it staffed 24/7. But they're now having to watch the entire border more closely for people crossing increasingly in both directions. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
A sexual misconduct charge against Lieutenant General Steve Whalen has been dropped. The military says the charge was related to what it describes as an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. Whalen was removed from his position as the head of military personnel in 2021 after the allegations were made. He was set to face a court-martial this morning on 2 charges. He has pleaded not guilty to a second charge related to an allegation he inappropriately changed a performance evaluation report for an employee. Russian airstrikes killed at least 4 people in Ukraine and caused significant damage to infrastructure at the Black Sea port of Odessa. The attacks destroyed grain storage facilities and caused significant damage to the seaport. Kyiv says the airstrikes are intended to prevent it from exporting grain to the world. The strikes have intensified as Kyiv presses on with a counteroffensive in the south and east that has made slow gains. It's hoped the arrival of U.S.-made Abrams tanks today in Ukraine will help boost the efforts. And Ukraine claims the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet was killed in last week's attack targeting occupied Crimea. On Friday, Ukrainian forces fired a barrage of missiles that hit the heart of the Kremlin's Black Sea Fleet, destroying a section of the Russian Navy's headquarters in Sevastopol. According to Ukraine's military, Russian commander Viktor Sokolov was killed along with 33 officers. Crimea has been the key hub fueling Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and has been a target for Ukrainian forces seeking to reclaim lost territory in recent months. An Italian mafia boss who was caught in January after spending 30 years on the run has died. 61-year-old Mateo Messina De Niro was suffering from colon cancer at the time of his arrest. Officials say he was transferred from a maximum security jail to a hospital prison ward when his condition worsened last month. De Niro was convicted of numerous crimes, including the murders of anti-mafia prosecutors, deadly bombings in Rome, Florence, and Milan, and the kidnapping and killing of a 12-year-old boy. A popular comedian now under police investigation. Coming up, the growing accusations against Russell Brand. Hollywood is one step closer to being back in action. After nearly 5 months of strikes, a tentative deal has been reached between the Writers Guild of America and the Alliance of Studios. But as Brittany Rosen reports, many productions will remain on pause.
The final scene has concluded in a months-long economically ruinous work stoppage by Hollywood writers. The WGA and the big studio bosses coming to a tentative 3-year deal that the union says was exceptional, with meaningful gains and protections for writers in every sector of the membership.
The mood as soon as the tentative deal was announced was one of ecstasy.
Celebrities reacting on social media. LeVar Burton, happy news. And Mindy Kaling, see you soon.
Good news for consumers because it means that late night television can resume and production of some of our favorite shows and movies can get back underway.
Though it could take several weeks before the contract is ratified, viewers can expect late night and daytime shows like Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore to be back on the airwaves early next month.
Don't expect to see things moving back into production that quickly.
The vast majority of scripted movies and streaming shows, however, still likely won't make the cut. Productions will remain on pause as actors continue to strike. Many of their demands, higher wages and worker protections, overlap with the writers. But issues like compensation around the use of artificial intelligence are distinct and will likely make it more difficult to reach a deal.
What does it mean for actors to be recorded once and then used in perpetuity, either their bodies, their voices, or both?
Now, at this point, it's unclear when actors will be able to step back into the spotlight. SAG-AFTRA congratulated writers and said that it is ready to return to the bargaining table with these big studio bosses. But at this rate, industry insiders say it could take all the way up until February before things stabilize in the film industry. Neetu?
Brittany Rosen in Washington. Thanks, Brittany. London's Metropolitan Police is investigating a number of sexual assault allegations against comedian and actor Russell Brand. The 48-year-old is accused of rape, assault, and emotional abuse in London and elsewhere between 2006 and 2013. The allegations were made by 4 women during a documentary and years-long joint investigation by Channel 4, The Sunday Times, and Times newspapers. Brand denies the allegations. Stuck upside down, ahead how some people became stranded on a ride at Canada's Wonderland. Canada's Wonderland is the largest amusement park in our country, attracting nearly 4 million guests every year. But what was supposed to be a fun night was anything but over the weekend when a bunch of thrill seekers got a scare nobody saw coming. Mike Trolet reports.
They're upside down.
Another Saturday night at Canada's Wonderland had almost wrapped up when a crowd started to form near the lumberjack ride. Something was clearly wrong because not only were the riders stuck, they were hanging upside down. Giashira Rivera was about to get in line when she heard the screams.
From the ride, people kept shouting, "Get us down." They kept screaming, "Get us down, take us down. When can we go down?" Others were screaming, "Call 911. Oh my God, we need to call 911. Oh my God.
The same thing happened on the lumberjack ride in 2021, except that situation was resolved in under 5 minutes. This most recent stoppage left riders inverted for a stomach-churning 25 minutes. In a statement, Wonderland said the park's maintenance team responded quickly, and 2 guests reported chest pain and were attended to at the park's health center before being released without need for further medical attention. The Canada Safety Council says Wonderland tests its rides daily and has multiple fail-safes built into each one.
If a ride is in operation and something goes wrong, or not even necessarily goes wrong, something is detected to be out of the normal realm of operation of that machine, the machine will stop as a fail-safe. It's unfortunate in this case that it stopped with the folks upside down. That of course is traumatizing.
But from a safety perspective, the ride did what it was supposed to. The added 25 minutes of hang time notwithstanding. Mike Trolet, Global News, Toronto.
Next, why Lego is taking apart its plans to make its famous bricks from recycled bottles.
Snap is good. The hold is good. Maya Turner has just made history.
And with that kick, University of Manitoba Bison's kicker Maya Turner is now the first woman to play and score in a regular season U Sports football game. She also converted all 3 of her extra point attempts and had a game-winning field goal in overtime. Turner called it an unreal experience. Did you ever dream big of what to build with your Lego? The options are endless, but after years of searching for sustainability, the world's largest toy maker has abandoned plans to make its famous bricks from recycled plastic. As Redmond Shannon reports, Lego is still probably one of the more sustainable uses we have for plastic.
Lego,
a rare constant across generations. By one estimate, there are 50 bricks for every human on Earth. That's about 400 billion pieces of plastic. In 2021, the Danish toy giant said it wanted to build some sustainable credentials and make Lego from recycled bottles instead of hydrocarbons. But now Lego says that doing so isn't worth it because the energy needed to turn bottles into bricks means there would actually be no reduction in carbon emissions.
The reality of plastics is that it's difficult to find both sustainable and practical replacements.
Environmental scholar Myra Hurd says oil extraction, plastic production and waste are all factors to weigh for companies like Lego.
This is a lesson in let's hold off on big praise until those big announcements are followed by actual change.
Lego Group says it is still testing and developing bricks from a range of alternative sustainable materials, including other recycled plastics. Lego fans say the popular toy does have one built-in sustainable trait.
You never throw out Legos. Don't do that.
Anne Brix, yes, her name really is Anne Brix, is from Denmark, the home of Lego.
I have Lego from when my son was a kid, and he's 26 now, and my granddaughter is actually playing with it.
Denise O'Brien, on the other hand, has kept her kids' Lego since they were kids.
So let's say between 27 and 30 years.
She and her husband Barry will only let go of their Lego in their will.
I think the great thing about Lego is the passing on the baton. So it's all three of our children are crazy, and the eldest girl who's married, she's converted her husband. So it just goes on, almost like Christianity.
Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is the Royal Canadian Mint Building in Winnipeg. We love seeing your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks so much for watching and have a great night.